Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Today is Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. We are here in the Commissioners' Conference Room at our Administrative Services Building for a Board of County Commissioners work session regarding compensation. I'm Chair Pro Tem, Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shadow McNally. Commissioner Stevens is not able to join us today, so I will be chairing the meeting. And joining me today is my colleague, Commissioner Kafalis. And I'm going to just turn this over, instead of doing all the introductions, and I had this thing about misphobia, about messing people's titles up and things. I'm going to just turn this over to Bridget Paris, our Human Resources Director. I'm not Human Resources, sorry.
It's Human Resources. You got it right.
I'm thinking other things. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and we're going to have this meeting on compensation, which we do every year. And I'm really anxious to hear some of the details you're going to share with us today. So Bridget, take it away.
Great, thank you. Again, my name is Bridget Paris, and I'm the HR Director.
And I'm going to pause you just a second. I just forgot to introduce our County Manager. Lorenda Volker is here, and she's an important part of this, and I want to everyone else in the room, we have lots of budget people and our Assistant County Manager, but I'll let them all introduce as we get up, and I apologize for interrupting, Bridget. Thank you.
No problem.
I'm Christine Keenest. I'm the Employee Relations Manager in HR.
I'm Eileen Brittingham, and I am the Compensation Specialist for Larimer County.
I'm Matthew Bahanan. I am the Budget Team Lead.
Great, thank you. So each year, as part of our budgeting process and in reviewing employee compensation, we collect data and go through a process to analyze and bring you recommendations, of which then you will provide your direction to the budget office about what to include in the budget preparation. So this work session talks about the work that we do in HR to be able to put together a recommendation for you to then, again, give to the budget office. So our agenda for today is the same as usual. Philosophy and plan design. We talk about the market and the economy, and then we talk about strategies and options that we can do related to employee compensation. So the philosophy for the county has two critical components. We're market-based and we're competitive. We compensate employees based on the nature and level of work performed and how well the employee accomplishes that work. Meaning that we look at two different types of increases, and we'll talk about those a little bit more as we go along. But we'll have a market increase, which we look at and use to move and adjust our pay plan, as well as the employees when we move that plan. And then in terms of how well the employee accomplishes the work, we do a merit increase, and employees are eligible for that merit increase with a meets or above evaluation, and that usually happens on their anniversary date. So how it works, we, over the past couple years, have had to transition our data source. So one of the very exciting things that we've worked on after losing one of our primary survey sources is we put together something called, we use the acronym CPEC, Colorado Public Employers Compensation. IT supported Eileen and I in this endeavor and created a data warehouse where other public employers across Colorado could report in their survey data. And when I say it in a sentence, it seems really simple, but it was a lot of work for our staff. This is our third survey collection. We did our first survey collection in about May of 2024. We did it again in September of 2024, and now we collected again in April of 2025. So as all of the public organizations are participating, they're learning about our new job summaries and about which jobs they should match to those job summaries. This CPEC, again, that acronym, Colorado Public Employers Compensation, is public employer ran. So it is not run by Larimer County. There's a committee of multiple public employers that put the charter together, that sets the rules, that provides enhancements, improvements, and other strategies. Eileen sits on that committee and helps lead that. I think, now I have to look at Eileen, there's 6 other members or 5?
We actually just increased our membership by 2 other counties, so
Oh,
we're
cool.
up to 8.
Sweet. So we want to make sure and get feedback. Primarily, right now, it is large public organizations, so our large counties, large cities. But we do have a few of the smaller counties, and that's one of our HR initiatives this year is for Eileen to help the communication and grow that so that we could provide a good resource for those smaller counties and smaller cities. But for now, we are up above, I think we're at 37 participants, and that's cities and counties across Colorado. So pretty good. We have about 500, I think there's a little more than that, jobs that are included for to bring data in. Of course, not everybody matches all of them, but that's been a great tool for us. It is still growing, and in terms of data consistency and reliability, we're getting closer, but have it being our only 3rd survey reporting period, we're not quite there yet. So while I'm confident in this last survey's individual data, I'm not so confident trending it, meaning comparing 2024's data to 2025 to look at those changes. I am reasonably confident in the 2025 survey collection as the organizations have gotten comfortable with the job listings and what they're doing. So that's an important note. For Larimer County, we are also looking at purchasing a large public and private survey. It collects both. So Eileen's been working on that. So hopefully next year we'll be including that large survey data along with our CPEC data. So
I'm just going to pause, and Justine, I don't know if once in a while we can kind of flash the screen that Bridget has on with showing some of the compensation and maintenance and that too, sometimes for the public on the video. I haven't seen it for a while. I just wanted to know if we could show some of the PowerPoint. Thank you. Thank you, Justine.
great. So ongoing with compensation, the other great part of that tool is we can access that data throughout the year. So anytime that we're doing not just our annual review, but we're looking at series or specific jobs, Eileen's able to use that. So after collecting our data, going job by job, doing some follow-up, we come to the commissioners here with this proposal, May or June. We do a lot of extra economic work into this, as well as engagement with our peers and the individual survey data. So as we go through this, we're trying to paint a whole picture because pay is just one piece of that, including the county's budget situation, which is going to be another consideration as you work to make a recommendation to the budget office. All right. I'll pause there. Any questions so far?
I don't believe we have any questions so far.
Great.
Thank you.
So our pay plan, we do complete individual job analysis. I do have on here that we do review trends from year to year. We're able to do that on some jobs consistently where we're really comfortable with that data out of the new tool. But some of the other jobs, we weren't comfortable holistically reviewing across the board year to year. So we do have a handful of jobs we're really comfortable with, and we'll continue to make adjustments there. We compare our market value of the job to the first quartile in our ranges. So that's what helps us decide whether we move jobs. We also identify if we need adjustments to the entire plan. Again, that's market, and that's what we'll be bringing to you with a recommendation. If we don't keep our plan moving, our plan doesn't stay competitive with market. And so that's what we call the range adjustments or the market adjustment.
Thank you. Commissioner Kafalis has a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pro Tem. For the sake of folks who may be listening, can you provide us with an example, like a job and how what you just described works with a real job?
Absolutely. So,
Thank you.
for example, we always pick on the accountant because for whatever
Or
reason, it's
accountants.
I know, it's alphabetical and the accountant shows up on top. And the other thing is that it's a good data job, right? It is reasonably good to benchmark and provide survey data for an accountant. Here at the county, we have a series of accountant jobs, and so multiple of our jobs have data. And so when we collect the market data for a job, we look at that survey, right? So we're getting a response from probably 20 organizations on an accountant that says, this is what we pay on average for that job. This is the incumbents in that job and what we pay them. And then we also look at their ranges. So every organization has a different pay plan. Their ranges may be shorter or longer or in different increments, but we look at that data also. So when we look at the individual information for an accountant, we're going to say the accountant should be in a certain grade based on its average of that data.
Can you assign dollar amounts to what you're saying?
I can try. I don't know them off my head, but let's say
60 grand for an accountant.
60,000 for that's what I was thinking. That was very good. So $60,000, that means the first quartile of the range. So we have a range, the first quartile, we want 60,000 to be aligned at that first quartile. So an accountant has a 30% opportunity to increase up to their max, 10% below that average pay. So if we're hiring at that first quartile, we're hiring at the average pay.
60,000.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep. And so when we're looking at our whole pay plan, what we like to do is, what's the overall change in all of our jobs? What do we see overall value of jobs, right? Because it's a economic consideration. Overall, we've seen over the last 10 years, an accountant just costs more to hire every single year. That's that pay plan adjustment. So we like to make an adjustment to the whole plan, which is what we call the market.
That's right.
We also move our employees so they don't fall behind in their ranges. Now, for employees, every year that an employee works for us, they become more experienced. So we want to progress them through that range. We use a merit increase to help progress them through their range up until they hit the max. So that range progression of a merit, usually we consider that value and look at what is an increased value of a job. I like to, it's not perfect, but I like to keep an eye on our CPI when we're looking at the value of a merit. All right, so we have two types of ways we manage our pay. We do market, which is the plan, and we do merit, which is the people. When we do merits, you can deliver merits in a few different ways. We do a pass-fail merit, and we do a pass-fail merit at a percentage. So you either get the merit or you don't get the merit, and the merit is always the same, irrelevant of whether you have an exceeds or a meets. You qualify for that pass-fail merit. If you are not meeting expectations as an employee, you do not get your merit at that time. However, we will work with employees to get them back up to where they need to be, and at that time, they would become eligible for the merit. You can do a variable merit amount. Some of our departments choose to do this, and they have various different strategies when they're looking at it. Variable merit means that some employees get a different percent increase than other employees. And that may be a good example is we want to progress employees through the range quicker when they're on the low end, faster slower when they're on the high end. So you may only move it 2% if you're on the high end of your range, but you may move it 3% if you're on the low end of the range. This is department by department, and it is various needs that we support them and build that plan. They still stay within their target budget, so they're not getting additional money, but they divvy that money up differently by employee.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. So can you apply what you just described, the pass-fail merit, flat amount, variable merit, to our example of the accountant?
Yep.
So we just hired somebody to be an accountant, a certain type, category of accountant. They're starting at 60,000. A year later, what happens?
If they are in a department that just does our pass-fail consistent amount, that employee would get whatever merit increase is approved by the commissioners in the budget that year.
It's 2.5%.
Yep, then they would get 2.5% added to their base pay permanently. If they're in a variable department, it would depend on what structure the department has approved. So that one, if they use like the example I gave, where if they're lower in the range, they get a higher percentage, then if they're higher in the range, they get a lower, right? Slowing them down at the end, moving them faster at the beginning, that employee might get 4%. So it depends on the department. We only have a handful of departments that do that. And it's really built on time and job and ongoing experience with communication on that variable.
Did you have any other questions, Commissioner?
I'm okay for now.
Okay. So I think I asked this question a couple years ago, but I'm trying to remember what you have said about this. But I remember when we talked about that market and trying to get better in that, range and be competitive. But we do have some folks who've been here 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, and they might be well at the top. So what happens to those folks? They're still fantastic, outstanding individuals doing great jobs, but that merit they can't get it. So I'm wondering, what does that look like? And because we have some amazing long-term employees here, and I'm just curious about that.
Correct. Right now, I think Eileen could probably correct me exactly, but we have over 300 people that are at the max of their range. That means those employees get the 2%, the plan adjustment, but they do not get a merit increase because we have progressed them all the way through the range, and that's the max value for a base pay salary that we offer for that job. There are other strategies to recognize that other year of contribution. And most organizations use a lump sum strategy for that so that it doesn't compile to base. And in financial situations where you're maybe, like for us, if we're in a deficit situation, those lump sums can be removed and no longer honored, where base pay can't be removed. So it's more of a bonus situation than it is an actual merit situation. I know Lorinda unpaused.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. I'm so focused on Bridget there.
I did, just to say that while we don't have an across-the-board lump sum bonus program for folks at the top of the range, managers do have the ability to offer performance bonuses. We have that in our plan, as long as it's within their budget, and that's typically not a problem. So when you have a person who's at the top of the range who's done an outstanding project or something really big that year, that is a tool they have to use. And of course, promotion to another position if they want to, if there is a career path for that job, is also an option. It's not perfect, because sometimes they are at the position they want to be in, and that is the market for the range. We have department heads in that position, just as many as I think percentage-wise, as we have folks within the organization. So it is imperfect, but we do take into account this market adjustment to make sure that everyone stays within that range and continues to receive that market.
I appreciate that and those insights. And I have to tell you, a lot of those folks, I think that a lot of them come up and say, I just love working here, I just love my job, and just feel grateful. So I just had to ask, because, you wonder about those things. And I don't think any system's perfect, as I've never heard any large corporation talk about their system being perfect or anything. So I'm sure we're not alone, but I know you all really care about, I know including the manager system, and I've heard everyone just cares so much about our employees and taking care of them. So that's that value and the guiding principle that we have always used and guided. Commissioner Cavalls, did you have something you wanted to add?
Thank you. I still I kind of wish you would bring it back to the example. So the accountant who started with the county at $60,000 a year within that first quartile. That was, and
Got
now
it.
they've been here for 20 years, and they're making 90,000, and they've maxed out.
Yep.
They get the COLA, but they don't get the merit, but they could get keep going.
Yep. So usually employees will max out after about 8 to 10 years.
Oh,
Our ranges are 40% wide. And so if they're starting at that first quartile at that $60,000, that means we have 30% left in that range. On average, the county offers 3% merits, that progression through the range. So an employee will hit that max at about 10 years. So at 10 years of employment, usually 8 to 10, because over time, sometimes we have a 5% merit and sometimes we have a 3%, but 8 to 10 years is usually that marker. And once they hit that max, they'll get that increase at the beginning of the year. That's the pay structure adjustment. We call that market. That averages about 2%. And that's the only increase that they'll get. As Lorinda mentioned, we have the guiding principles bonus, and it allows, we just increased the threshold for approval for decision makers, and increased the total amount that is allowed under that policy. We also have non-cash bonus, so there is an opportunity to give employees gift cards. Obviously, we have Nectar, so if there's a unique request that you'd like to bring through Nectar, we could consider that non-cash when it's cashed out. We also, you're allowed to give administrative leave. Also, the decision makers are. Administrative leave is actually a positive thing. I know in some organizations that has a negative connotation to it, but not here. That's the good one. So days of leave can be given as recognition too. It does get, hard and requires a little more creativity. Hopefully you guys don't mind, but I'm going to do it anyway. The two staff sitting next to me are both maxed out, based on tenure and hitting that. And so it does, you have to get a little more creative to continue to recognize those employees in those situations. Hopefully I'm trying to be creative.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you all as we, I've always been, I think I asked this question 2 or 3 years ago. And so, so now it's very familiar.
I did do a survey, and Lorinda and I have talked about it. I would say we are on the, I don't know how to describe it. Of 20 or so organizations, there are only a couple that don't do some sort of lump sum, and we are one of those. So
We have talked about that internally, and because of the state funding issues and the gap that we have to find, we've put this discussion on hold for now, but it is not permanently on hold. We will continue to talk about this as an issue. We know that it's important to staff. It feels like we have to solve this budget gap before we can talk about doing something different.
adding additional.
Thank you, Lorinda. Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate that extra information.
So next we go into what's happening in the, like a bigger picture, because compensation is one component of what employees are experiencing, what unemployment looks like, employment growth. So we put together some of the economic statistics so that you can look and see. We're seeing a slight increase in Colorado's unemployment rate. We are lower up here in Fort Collins, Loveland than the state of Colorado. We're seeing reduced national employment growth, which I think is to be expected. Employment growth here locally, we've seen a decrease, but we are higher than all Colorado. All Colorado pay increases. City County Denver does a survey and they ask everyone, so we just used their survey data. All Colorado pay increase projections in total is 3%. Pay structure, some are funded and some aren't funded, so that gets a little bit messy, but it's 2%. CPI increase, And all of these numbers get adjusted also, so I just wanted to put a disclaimer if anybody goes out there to look at either the most recent Colorado legislative report or an end of year. The numbers move, they're always pretty close, but for 2024, 3.4%. I don't know that they'll adjust it again. Sometimes we see some adjustment throughout the entire year on the prior year, but the projection for 2025 is 2.3 as of their last report. So from my perspective, it's nice to see a little bit of a settling and a decrease of that CPI as we had been chasing it even up into the 7 and 8% a couple years ago. So hopefully that keeps us settled a little bit. All right, building estimates and things to consider. When we bring to you our compensation recommendation, we're considering our data that we have. We're looking at these economic factors, understanding what that may look like for hiring and retention and, in general, what employees are seeing in cost index changes. We do not review housing. We always get that ask. We don't put housing or daycare into our considerations in terms of what increases should look like. Housing is sometimes caught in those economic factors, but not perfect. We know in northern Colorado here, we are a standout in housing costs, and we also recognize some of the limited availability of childcare, especially for infants. So I just want to call that out. It's not something that is brought into our modeling, but we also know that those are factors that employees are dealing with. So what we're going to bring you is our recommendation based on data and information that we've collected, and is not necessarily based on all of the challenges that you face as commissioners with building a budget and considering all of the service delivery at the county. So, timing for us, we are earlier than most of the other counties. One thing I love about Larimer County is that we put our employees first and then work to put our budget around that. So thank you to the commissioners, the budget team, and the strategies, our leaders that build this process. So I want to call that out loud. We are not a what's left for our employees county. We are put our employees first and continue to look at our services. So first, thank you. It also means we go first, so we don't know a lot about what other organizations are actually going to do in terms of being competitive. Market's is external again. We like to keep our pay plan competitive. Merit, that's internal. That's how we move those employees through the ranges. Budget, we recognize that in this current situation, we are looking at, I think it's fair to say, a deficit situation. I'm looking over at Lorendo, where we're really trying to reduce our spend, and we recognize that.
Bridget, can I have you pause there
Yep.
for a moment? I know you're on a roll, but since you made that statement, I don't know who wants to take this, the county manager or Matthew, but I think we should clarify that, why, and that for anyone who's listening, because I think that's an important
Agreed.
clarification, so.
I think that's right. So briefly, and I'm looking to Matthew to correct me if there's clarification needed, but generally speaking, the legislature last year capped the county's revenue over a 2-year period, which will create a long-term deficit for the county. So we are not operating in a deficit at the moment. We do have time, but we do have to reduce our overall spending by $6 to $8 million over the next couple of years. So we're not at a deep deficit. Life is not ending as we know it, but we are looking at services that we are not required to do, that we're not required to do at the level that we're doing them, and keeping in mind that we don't want to impact the community any more than we need to. And so that is an exercise we're going through with this year's budget. We will continue to do that until we reach that number.
Thank you. I think it's, and Commissioner, I see your hand, I think the word we've been using is structural deficit. Could we kind of explain what that means, or I know that's one of Matthew's new favorite words.
So a
Sort of.
deficit, a budget deficit would be when your expenses in one year are more than your revenues. A structural deficit would be your typical annual ongoing expenses are more than your annual ongoing revenues. And our forecast, which I'm always hedged, forecasts are based on assumptions, and a lot could change with this year's reappraisal and 2027's year reappraisal. But our forecast currently shows a structural deficit. So like right now, today, this year, the county budget is fine. We have healthy reserves. We're able to fund services. But the forecast going forward shows a structural deficit that needs to be corrected over time.
And if I might, okay, and if I might, just for some maybe folks who are listening, just because I know this is a question that I will hear after any kind of conversation. Considering the last 2 or 3 years, we have not really grown county government. I think it was, I know you need to correct me. I want to say less than a percentage the last year or something. I'm trying to think about that number with growing, when I say like adding staff and growing things, we've been very fiscally conservative and very thoughtful and intentional the last few years. Would that be a good thing to say?
Yeah, the last few years, we've added less than like 1% increase in the number of staff. I will say our costs have gone up, especially with liability and the cost of equipment and materials.
And services.
And services, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe add that a little bit for context to understand why we're in this situation that we're having this. Commissioner, did you want to add or say anything to that? Okay.
I think I'll also add that some of the state expenses have been shifted to the county as well to cover. And so not only are things costing more, some new costs are coming our direction for things we've already done that we previously received state dollars for. So it's a combination of things, but it is not because we've added a new department or a new service or a lot of new staff. I think the board has been very thoughtful about approving very limited, targeted staff. That's how we're well under 1%.
Thank you, Lorenda, for adding that. And Commissioner Cafalas?
Since we're on a bit of a roll here, I guess we would be remiss if we didn't make reference to what are often called unfunded mandates. And legislation is passed oftentimes requiring counties to do certain things, and often it's not adequately funded. And whether it's administrative costs or other kinds of things, we have to be very creative about how to be complying with these new laws.
Thank you, Commissioner. You and I are aligned in thinking that way. I believe it's in the millions that we have since I came on the board and these unfunded mandates, and they seem to keep coming. So I think that combination and just bringing that context, we have a lot of variables that are bringing us to this point that Bridget was talking about, this structural deficit that we're
Yeah.
having. So I'm going to let you continue. Thank you,
Great.
Lorenda and Matthew, for adding some of that. I just thought it was important to add that context. Thank you.
I agree, and that's why we include budget in that things to consider section, because when we're bringing you our compensation and our pay information, that's one piece of the many things, as you've shared, that you have to consider when giving budget direction to our departments and offices. So, when we're talking about pay increases, we recognize that when we're asking for increases to employees, that 45% of our personnel funds are coming from other fund areas. And as Lorenda shared, there's a lot of volatility in some of those other fund areas. So I just want to recognize that. Also, 55% is from our general fund, and we just talked about the structural deficit and in terms of what that looks like. So a 1% pay increase is about 1.9 million. So it is a big lift in terms of a financial aspect, 45% from other funds and 55% for general fund. Year over year review, we like to give you 8 years. I don't know why I picked 8, but I have picked 8 over the last however many years I've been doing this. I think maybe that's what fits on the screen. And so you're able to look back and see what I believe is some consistency in what we're able to provide to employees. We see about an average of a 2% merit or a 2% pay structure, so market, and a 3% merit increase with some variation over the years depending on other variables. It makes sense that that's reasonably consistent, except for our couple really large standout years. CPI tends to hover at about the similar amount across the board. You can see that below with the inflation rate. And again, we had 2022, which was a really huge standout for us, which we responded well in 2023 with a 5% merit for employees there. So again, I think we've done a good job over the years. I think we're conscious of looking at employee compensation, not in a single year, but also over a period of time. For 2026, we will be recommending a 2% pay structure adjustment. That's the market. It happens on the first day of the first pay period in the year, and a 3% merit increase for employees. So that would be our recommendation. You have a good table of consistent information here. I just want to reiterate that we're coming to you based on a pay and a market, but we also recognize all of the other variables that the commissioners need to consider when giving the budget office direction. I think each year, Lorinda, I have to ask this, and maybe Eileen will remember now, I'm pretty sure. There's no decision out of this work session. It becomes just direction for building the budget.
That's exactly right. So right
Okay.
now, there's a placeholder in the budget system for salaries. Everyone knows that's the case. And then following today's work session, the budget office will go back and build your direction into the direction they give to departments to build their budgets around. So until you adopt the budget, that's when you make the decision on these changes.
Thank you, Bridget and Lorinda, I appreciate that. So we're at this point where you're looking for some direction. So I will turn it over to Commissioner Kafals to see if he has any further questions or comments.
Thank you. For the sake of the folks who might be watching or listening, could you explain, with regard to the recommended increases for 2026, and our fiscal year, of course, is the calendar year, January 1st to the end of the year, 2% plus 3% adds up to 5%, but the little box below says 3.5%. So if you could explain that, and the 3.5%, if 1% is 1.9 million, what kind of impact are we looking on the budget? 3.5 times 1.9. I'll rely on our budget team leader to do the arithmetic.
Do you want to take over the Bridget math, Matthew?
So county math, 2 plus 3 equals 3.5. And let me explain. So
Go slowly now for the.
let's say it's an accountant or maybe a budget analyst. 2% if they're in the within the range. That range goes up 2%, and then a merit. The reason we don't allocate budget for the 3%, so the total 5, is some budget analysts are topped out, and so there is no zero increase. The merit also comes on the anniversary, and so if you are hired in July, you don't need the full year's worth of the merit increase, you just need half. And every department is different, and so the number does come out different for every department, but that's the reason we only use half of the merit, which would be 1.5% of 3. So 2 plus 1.5 is actually the 3.5, and that's
So
where that.
3.5% times 1.9 million is what? Are we budgeting? We have to build that into the budget.
So the initial targets that we showed in May included a 2% market and a 3% merit, which would be 1.5% increase. Also, we made assumptions about benefits. So there's health insurance, there's dental, there's also all of the benefits tied to pay, such as a retirement match, and all of those have been included in those initial targets. So the number is a little bit more than the 1.9 or the 3.5% increase, which would be about 5 million
Okay.
within the general fund.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you all for the hard work. I know this is an incredibly thoughtful and detailed process. It's a team effort between Human Resources and our budget folks. I think Larimer County continues to be very unique in that we look at this upfront rather than seeing what's left to address personnel costs. I mean, ultimately, what do we have? About 2,100 FTEs, and we provide a variety of services from human services to making sure that roads and bridges are in proper order, although we're challenged there, of course. So I support all the hard work that's gone into this, and I'm certainly supportive of the direction that's being recommended this afternoon, and our folks will build it into the budget, and we'll make some further decisions, actual decisions down the road. I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I have a few things and I'll let Lorinda wrap it. I have a few questions. Now that I've seen this last page, I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
So I went back to the page with what's happening and looking at the Colorado employment growth and then the Fort Collins employment growth and then the unemployment in Fort Collins, Loveland, and looking at what's 2024. And then I look at what's on the 8-year overview for 2025. And it looks like when you say northern Colorado, does that include Weld and other folks? And so that number seems to have climbed. And I'm curious about that when, like the Fort Collins on this one, we're looking at kind of being below the state's rate. But then on this northern Colorado, we're kind of above the state's rate. So I'm curious.
It's going to be a projection.
Projection,
Because
okay.
they don't have it yet. So, variables that would go into that, I would have to study it a little more and go back into their kind of narrative. But usually there's some sort of insight about large employers or about any trends. And I don't know, Eileen, if you remember reading through it, but I did not earmark that, but I can. I usually experience conservative projections from the Colorado legislative reports. And so that would be my guess. I bet there's some conservative there, or they know something a little more about the economic area that we don't. So that report comes out, I think quarterly. So we would have been looking at the March one. And I can follow up and look and see maybe what insights come out of that narrative.
Okay.
Commissioner, I would also add, we know anecdotally through our workforce center that some of the decisions made about federal staff early in the first quarter of the year, we have over 1,000 federal staff members in the Fort Collins regional area. And so I wonder if that's playing into this, if that anticipation of more, or at least looking back at those probationary employees that were released, maybe that had something to do with it.
Makes sense.
That's a great point. And I guess to build on my question is, when we're looking at what's happening, we were looking at the Colorado versus Loveland, Fort Collins, but on the overview, you're looking at the region because it impacts us because of their larger employees. So I'm trying to, on this slide.
I think it's still Fort Collins, Loveland.
Okay.
We just had it labeled Northern
Okay.
Colorado.
All right.
Because we use that same section of the Colorado Legislative Council for that one. So,
And then looking at the inflation rate, it looks like with even just trying to do the payment just structure, and if we're giving this direction, we're kind of staying a little bit ahead of what's forecasted for inflation, at least trying to keep up with the cost. So that's a positive. Am I reading that correctly?
yes.
Yeah, okay. And then looks like Northern Colorado pay increases as projected. That includes private and government. It includes all the big employers, right?
That one is just our public employers that
Oh, okay.
responded to Denver's survey. So we did not pick up private. Right now, we don't have a resource to collect those projected surveys from the private sector.
So that would be cities and counties then, and so some of the cities that have,
Sales tax.
yeah, okay. That's interesting. All right, I'm glad you explained that. Sorry, my head's just kind of.
Good.
Spinning lots of things. And then the double star on the last page, the 8-year overview, you have the survey jobs and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Excluding sworn positions, that's our law enforcement, and we have a different system or a different step program with that.
Correct.
That's kind of something that you have worked on, so that shows a similar increase, because I know we moved them through their range quicker because of the characteristics of people don't stay in that career very long sometimes because it is a very intense and important job here in our region. So I'm wondering about that. I'm assuming there's that's already been distinguished with the steps and the columns. I think that's what it is, or maybe not.
It's a step blend, yep.
Step blend. So that's all kind of showing a progression as well, correct?
Yep, there'll be movement. So we collect, most of our law enforcement peers are all on step plans as well. So Eileen went through and collected all the specific step plan data and presented that to the sheriff, I want to say almost 2 weeks ago. And so we provided the sheriff with the data and with the information we have, and he plans to bring back any requests or adjustments that he has that would be outside of his target allocation. So we have a recommendation that we can give him within the target, and if he had any extra, he would bring that back.
So the target allocation, just to be clear, is the 3.5% that everyone else gets. It's the bucket of funds used to be able to provide pay increases. In the case of the sheriff, it would be step pay increases. Any changes to the plan will be a separate work session or a budget request to do something different. So there would be another process to deal with that.
Yep, and he's still reviewing the data that we gave him, and he'll come back with his requests.
Thank you. I just must be the light. Thank you both. And Lorena, you must be able to read my mind because you both answered it, but that was my next question, so you answered that. So thank you very much. That helps me understand that. First, let me just say, I commend you for adjusting and adaptability, not having that old way of doing it, and how you built this partnership and coalition with our partners to show that we're better together and working on this, and not such a competitive kind of mindset, but how we can share data and help each other. And I think you said over 300 groups, or how many? 8 counties and.
There's about 37 participants right
yeah.
now.
That's-
I think 37.
yeah.
I'm right around there.
Okay.
And we survey about 500 jobs.
Oh, that's it. That's the number. And so I wanted to just say thank you. That's pretty outstanding, pretty interesting. And I'm sure you learn from each other, so I'm sure there's a lot of value in that. So I want to just say, first off, I think that's just amazing, and I really appreciate the innovation there, to just innovative spirit to kind of, hey, if we don't have this, let's make our own, which we have done this a lot in a lot of ways. I could go through a whole list. I keep calling it the Larimer way, but our employees just, besides collaborating and partnering, you guys figure it out, right? We just find solutions, and it's just, I think it's pretty cool. I also just want to thank, cross department and jurisdiction kind of collaboration and discussion. Our mighty budget teams here, Matthew, outstanding, and just know that the data and the information and working together, it's so important. And I really like that you stressed in the presentation time out, we go first because we put our employees first. We say that every year, and I thank you for saying that every year, because that is of value and it's really important. And I'm glad I hope our employees hear that, because it is kind of a really important step in our budget process, because it is such a big value of ours. So I wanted to just kind of call that out again. That always warms my heart when you say that. And if anything I remember from these sessions is when you say that.
Go first.
Yep. And I just want to thank you all for the work that you do together. It's important data and information, because we want to take care of our employees, and it's a special place to live, but it's also, as you said, a hotbed for growth, and it's a lot going on, and we want to be able to, there's a lot of things we have out of our control, though. So with that being said, I think this is a really fiscally conservative and good approach to be good stewards, but also make sure we're taking care of folks and staying within that market and things. So I really appreciate the data-driven, thoughtful approach to all of this. And it gives me a lot of confidence that when you come before us and when you make this recommendation, there's a lot of, I know we have no idea all the work that you have put in. I'm sure it's, especially Eileen,
Especially Eileen.
yeah, just immense amount of work, but it gives us really good, solid information for us to make some comments and give some direction today. So I do support this direction, and I'm sure Commissioner Stevens, I'm going to make sure she gets this, and if she has some questions, I'm sure she can talk to either you or Lorenda and get caught up. And I know she was very invested and this was really mattered to her, but she couldn't be here today. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I think we have, Lorenda, did you want to add, or Commissioner, did you want to add something?
Just very quickly, regarding the quarterly revenue forecast that is put out by Legislative Council staff and the OSPB, Office of State Planning and Budgeting, I believe it is probably this week that they'll be offering their next revenue forecast. If it was March, it's usually right around the 20th or so. So I wonder if there are any dramatic changes, how does that affect what we're talking about here, or does it?
Not usually.
Okay.
I mean, we can kind of keep our eye on and see what those trends look like. Like I said, I see it wiggle a lot of the metrics, a lot of the forecasting throughout the year. It usually doesn't completely settle till about a year after.
Great, thank you. How about?
Lorenda, would you like to?
Yeah, I think one last comment, because we did talk about being in a structural deficit and we're talking about giving a wage increase. And I just want to say, we've talked a lot about this philosophically as an organization. There are things we must do as a county. There are things that we do because we know are beneficial, but they're not required by the state. But we want the folks who do them to be paid competitive wages. And so we don't know where we'll end up over time. If we can take advantage of some vacancies, we can find some salary savings in that way. But this is a philosophical decision to stay competitive for salaries and compensation so that we have the best staff to provide services, even if we provide fewer services or services differently. And so that is, it feels a little bit of a disconnect. It isn't. It very much is part of the budget plan. It's part of what we talk about. But we don't want employees who can't find work someplace else to be employees. We want our employees to stay, feel they're being treated fairly, and do that great work that we've come to expect from them, and the community has come to expect from them. So I just wanted to make that clear, that maybe one piece that was hanging, if anyone is watching this, why are we giving raises when we're in this deficit? And we will resolve the budget issue, but we will resolve it differently than wages.
Thank you, well said, and I think that's a great point, so thank you for making that statement. So unless there's other comments or questions, appreciate all the data and work, and
you.
appreciate the conversation. Did you get your direction today? Great. And so at 2:23, we are adjourned. Have a great afternoon, everyone.